I covered resilience under the sustainability course from a book I used from Per Becker, where resilience is defined as a pathway or a process that will bring you back to the sustainable development pathway. So, let's say a country like India pledged net zero by 2070, and obviously you want to get there on a sustainable pathway, and you will constantly have risks from climate change, the geopolitics and so on, that will distract you or take you out of this pathway, away from this pathway. And resilience is about coming back to the pathway and staying on the pathway. And these are some papers that I got from my friend Udit Bhatia, who's an expert on resilience, and he gave me a caveat that there are papers, but none of them are very good at a pathway to implementation to accomplish resilience. So resilience remains a concept that sounds very intuitive, and it's been applied very specifically, like network of trains, like Udit does, or flood resilience, as we will see here. So I'll cover few papers that I got from him just to give you a sense of what I learned from reading the papers that he gave me. And as you Okay, so I had to stop the video and switch the sound source. It was coming from the camera, which sounds a little echoey, so I switched to this headphone, which sounds much better. So we're talking about resilience. Let's jump to the paper that we want to look at. As I said, one of the first ones that I got from Udit Bhatia, and I'm going to be very brief. In science, we have these articles called Policy Forum, which are relatively short and basically kind of perspectives on specific topics on where we want to go. Appeared in 2014, a bit old, but the idea is still very solid. Integration of models for storms and floods, damages and protections should aid resilience planning and investments. So you always need a cost benefit analysis every time you propose new measures that require spending money. So resilience is a good idea, and people would love to have resilience, but as soon as you say, but this will cost, people won't want to know what the cost will be, and they begin to discount the future, in the sense they try to calculate how much are we investing and who will benefit when, and why should we worry about future generation, all kind of temporal discounting and so on and so forth. So this is under climate adaptation, evaluating flood resilience strategies for coastal megacities. Recent flood disasters in the United States, so this article is also the examples are also old, from the US, Philippines and Britain, illustrate how vulnerable coastal cities are to storm surge flooding. Floods caused the largest portion of insured losses among all catastrophes around the world in 2013. The numbers have only grown since then. We just had the warmest 2 years, 2023, 24. I'm still in December 2024, but we're going to end up being above 1.5 degrees C, the magic number. Population density in flood-prone coastal zones and megacities is expected to grow by 25% by 2050. Projected climate change and sea level rise may further increase the frequency and or severity of large-scale floods. Lots of new literature has already come since 2014 on the duration, frequency and intensity of floods and other extremes as well, because you can have compound events, plus the area covered are growing as well. So jumping ahead, what are the barriers and building codes that typically you face when you want to build resilience for coastal megacities? And for good measure, we have the downtown end of I think this is New York City, if I remember correctly. So this is the replacement of the World Trade Center. A wealth of ideas about protecting New York City from floods has been proposed, including barriers, levees, wetland restoration, and beach strengthening that are effective in reducing flood occurrence in large parts of the city, so natural defenses plus engineering approaches. However, as in other cities, some of these large-scale engineering options have been criticized because they are costly or may even harm the environment. Other measures, such as reducing exposure or vulnerability, for example by enacting zoning regulations and enhancing building codes, may considerably reduce flood damage and entail lower investment costs, but they do not prevent floods from entering the city. So do you want to just prevent the flood waters from coming in, or do you want to let them come in but build a system that can handle this inundation as it then leaves with various other approaches? We present three main classes of strategies that focus, I jumped ahead, on reducing vulnerability or avoiding flood, or combination of both. The resilient open city strategy S1 is a cluster of measures to enhance building code strategies in New York. There is a reference there, by elevating or dry or wet flood proofing both existing and new buildings. So there's some retrofitting involved, but new buildings will follow this code of open city strategy. Storm surge barrier strategies S2 with ABC that we'll look at. These aim to lower flood probabilities in New York City and parts of New Jersey with barriers, levees, and beach nourishments. So you start to deal with storm surge inundation at the beach itself. In New Jersey, environmental and New York City, of course. Environmental dynamics S2A consists of three barriers to close off parts of New York City and New Jersey that preserve wetland dynamics of Jamaica Bay, which is a natural defense mechanism. Bay closed S2B expands on S2A with wetlands by adding a fourth barrier that closes off Jamaica Bay completely. The New Jersey-New York Connect, as labeled as S2C, replaces three barriers from S2B with one large barrier in the outer harbor to protect a larger area. So we'll see a figure in a minute. The barrier systems are designed to withstand an extreme surge of 8 to 10 meters or 25 to 30 feet. That's a massive storm surge. The hybrid solution, jumping ahead, S3, so this is S1, S2, S3, we'll see the figure again, reflecting many measures as seen in reference 9, combines building code measures of S1 that turned out to be cost effective according to our analysis only in high-risk 100-year return flood zones defined by the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, with protection of critical infrastructure to reduce economic loss due to business interruption. So there are various details that you want to include in planning or optimizing these measures, hybrid solutions, including the cost itself, right? So S3 includes moderate local flood protection measures such as levees and beach nourishment that are also part of S2C. The local protection measures and building codes for new structures are adjustable to future climate change, so you have some flexibility built in, as they can be upgraded if flood risk increases in the coming decades. So sea level is rising, and there are details on why that's happening around New York City, let's say, and you have other climate changes including more meandering of the jet stream and cyclones becoming more intense, maybe coming further north, and so on and so forth. So jumping ahead then, modeling flood risks and estimating costs. This is critical because whatever investment you want to do, you want to have some sense of the risk, even though they are always uncertain, and of course you want to know the costs. The heart of the method is a probabilistic flood risk model developed for the city. We simulated 549 storm surge simulations varying from extremely low probability events to more frequent storms using a new coupled hurricane hydrodynamic inundation model. So Sandy taught everybody a valuable lesson on why to do this at all. Then we applied flood depth damage curves to calculate potential damage to buildings and vehicles at the census block level. So each country has a census, and then they are done at a scale which is a block level. In addition to flood risks to buildings, the risk to other categories like infrastructure The risk to parts of New Jersey and indirect economic effects were added based on observed consequences of Hurricane Sandy in 2012, which was a massive wake-up call. And New Jersey and New York City are heavily interdependent because a lot of the workforce comes in and goes out. A lot of cars come in, buses, even ferries, etc. None of the flood protection barrier strategies is economically attractive. We discussed these, and I'm jumping ahead here. A lot of text I'm skipping, so you can go back and read. So the cost benefit ratios or BCRs are less than 1. You don't want that. You want the benefit over cost to be greater than 1 for sure. So under climate conditions, this is already the case, or a low climate change scenario. So imagine if the climate change scenario is much stronger than BCR, being lower than 1 even in the current condition is bad news. S2C and S3, which are the scenarios strategies we looked at, have a BCR of higher than 1 in a middle climate change scenario. All barrier strategies and hybrid strategy are, however, economically attractive if flood risk develops according to a high climate change scenario, such as rapid ice melt and significant increase in storm activity, with the highest net present value of 64 billion for S2C and 50 billion for S3. Investment strategies are slightly more economically attractive if a 150-year lifetime is used. Okay, lots of details there, but basically you want to choose some climate change projection scenario from what was available at the time, which was CMIP 5. Now we have CMIP 6. But you also want to have cost benefit analysis, cost estimates, and you want to have a time horizon so that the time discounting is done when you do the benefit cost ratio analysis itself. Okay, and you want to use events like 1 in 100 year, 1 in 1000 year. 1 in 1000 year will obviously, 1000-year event will obviously be big, but the projections would say they will become more frequent. Once in 10-year event may become once in 3 years or 2 years, and so on and so forth. So all these kind of details have to be included in this probabilistic flood risk model. For a given discount rate and climate scenario, there is inherent uncertainty in the models which influence the benefit cost analysis results, but the impact of this within scenario uncertainty on the results is smaller than the impact of selecting a different discount rate and or climate scenario. You have a sense of what is discount rate. Basically, if you are receiving $1 today versus $10 in 6 months, you may choose $1 because you think I'll take it and make money. I don't want to wait 6 months for $10, even though it's 10 times more. And it can be the other way. If you're investing $100 million today, you want to know, or $64 billion, you want to understand how much it will be worth in 10 years or 20 years. So discounting is complicated, but it's like a number that people use based on what they want to do. If you want to deny funding for a project, you just set a very high discount rate saying this will become worthless in a very short time. Or if you want to support it, you choose a very low discount rate saying this is really worth it and the benefits will last for a long time, and so on and so forth. The latter is particularly challenging for policymakers because trends in climate change caused flood risks are still highly uncertain. So among all this, you compute risk, even if it's probabilistic, there is still a lot of uncertainty. So you have to make decisions under uncertainty anyway. So let's look at this figure then. Strategies for protection versus reducing vulnerability, right? So it's about allowing floods to come in but recover quickly and effectively and back to functionality versus just trying to prevent floodwaters from coming in. So here are the areas covered in gray. Barriers are put in here at key locations like the lower New York Bay and the outer harbor barrier, and moderate enhancement protection along these thin orangish lines here along the river banks. And you have a barrier here as well on the East River. This is the Atlantic Ocean here. And storm surge and sea level rise are always playing on, from Long Island side and from here, southern parts from New Jersey side. and you have levels or nourishment levies and or nourishment. So beach nourishments are expensive, but they are supposed to act as barriers, reduce erosion, reduce storm surge, and so on. Sandy Hook is where the lot of damages happened, but there is also the Sandy Hook. Let's not get into what happened there. Okay, so here you are looking at enhanced building codes. So the S1, S2, ABC, and S3 are being discussed here. Protection, critical infrastructure along here, okay, and moderate enhancement protection in these reddish lines, and levies again here. So you can see these are different strategies. Let's just read a little. In left, we are looking at strategy 2C, reducing the length of the coastline of the New York City, New Jersey area as much as possible to minimize flood protection costs. 2 storm surge barriers are developed, so we are looking at those, and so these are the details that are looking at these. So bulkheads, levees, landfill, and various other things are used here. Is strategy S3, combining cost-effective flood-proofing measures with local protection measures of critical infrastructure, such as such a hybrid solution aims at keeping options open, either by building codes that can be enhanced in the future with additional local protection measures, or storm surge barriers that can be developed. So flexibility is built in along with cost effectiveness. Okay, so how you make these choices obviously matter. After all that, you still have to make policies and worry about payments, because you want these, even if you invest and build them, sustaining them and maintaining them is going to cost money, and that has to be mainstreamed into the budget process into the future. Our study provides the economic rationale for some measures proposed by the City of New York, implementing improved cost-effective building codes, such as elevating new buildings and protecting critical infrastructure by including adaptation measures into maintenance works, is the most cost-effective strategy. Given the large existing building stock in New York City, this might only have marginal impacts if another hurricane occurs in the next few years, though. A challenge with flood-proofing buildings is to incentivize those at risk to make such investments and to monitor compliance with building code regulations, which has been shown to be an important behavioral issue internationally. So you can set up codes and try to enforce them, but regulations, enforcement, and an entity or institution that monitors these compliances is not easy. You need, again, governance structure there as well, not just policies. Now comes the big policy question: who should pay to make New York City or any city more resilient to future flood disasters? A small part of the investment costs of S3 will have to be paid directly by homeowners for flood-proofing their houses, whereas the largest costs of flood defenses are supposed to be paid by the city through new taxes, increased debt, and reallocation of the current budget. This is always tricky. So you will basically build systems that have acceptable risks and unacceptable risks. So acceptable risks are that earthquakes may come and destroy everything and government has to worry about it. But unacceptable risks are where every little storm can do damage. So all the policies, building codes, etc. have to make sure that unacceptable risks are basically assigned appropriately to either homeowners who didn't comply or contractors who didn't follow the guidelines, building codes, etc. If estimated benefits to the rest of the United States and the international economy of preventing future flooding of New York City are effectively captured, though positive externalities in this case, so that will be transferable lessons. Costs could arguably be shared by city, state, and federal government and private sector, which would mean that protection costs are distributed more widely. So there is a plan to learn from building resilience in New York City, with costs, the lessons being transferable to the rest of the state and other cities. For instance, with more than 50 million tourists visiting the city every year, a simple $10 resilience fee equivalent to the maximum September 11 airline security fee anyone traveling in the United States is now paying for a round-trip ticket could help. So you just tell people visiting New York City that you're going to pay $10 resilience fee as a part of providing you a visitable city. Okay, if the financial burden on the New York City budget is offset by such complementary funding and spread over time, for instance, by issuing a dedicated resilience bond paid back over 15 years, that's an investment where you get investment money and you pay it back over time through interest on the bonds. Protecting city then becomes more financially appealing to local policymakers. So finance cost benefit analysis always end up being the ultimate yes or no or deal breakers. Transferability to other coastal cities is of course important. Elements of our methodology are applicable for coastal megacities around the world where flood resilience plans are currently debated. So pay attention more to S1, S2A, BC and S3 so that these will need tweaking for specific locations, but the broad guidelines are valid everywhere. Many strategies that were implemented have thus far been the result of long learning by doing process, such as elements of large-scale flood protection that have been employed with substantial economic and environmental benefits in the Netherlands, who are really used to living below sea level for centuries, and I have a podcast on that. International examples can serve as an inspiration for designing effective flood resilience policies elsewhere, but flood risks and management approaches require location-specific analysis. Depends on sea level, whether it's rising or falling, cyclones, everything else that decides local flood risks. In order to better inform decision makers about the robustness of their investment choices, scientists have to accompany BCA's benefit cost analysis with broad range of scenarios for the future, different discount rates of course, and an interval of model outputs representing model uncertainty and sensitivity results. So the way decisions are made in Netherlands would be very different than decisions made in the US, and the way decisions will be made in New York or are made in New York and California versus Texas or the southern states will be very different as well. Okay, it's also important to maintain the flexibility to challenge policies when new information on future scenarios becomes available, whether increased investments or scaling down retrofitting and upgrading investments if threat is receding. Most BCAs address one of these issues in isolation, and we recommend that all should be included in an integrated analysis. Uncertainty is inherent to such estimations, but it should not be used as a reason or to justify not doing anything. Okay, so here are some costs and main BCA results of flood management strategies. So you are looking at S2A, S2B, S2C and S3C. So total investments and costs, estimated BCRs less than 1, but it depends on the discount rate used. So BCR drops significantly if you increase the discount rate basically, and you can see that's the case for all these strategies. But S3, you can see the BCR is higher. You want it to be as high as possible, and the range here is quite high as well, 0.23 to 0.73, and obviously if you increase the discount rate you drop the BCR. And here this is for the current climate and for middle climate change scenario. So how much you want to invest may depend on what the scenario you will use is, but cost benefit analysis and cost in general determines how much you will invest, because even if the sea level rise is said to be 1 meter, there may be no way you can pay for protecting against 1 meter sea level rise. So you will come back to BCR with different discount rates. But here you can see that current climate is already there. You will have to do this retrofitting to do resilience building, but for future scenarios, these provide BCR of greater than 1 or even greater than 2 for these strategies. But you can see if you increase discount rate, you will begin to discount the future heavily, so you drop the BCR by 50% in all these cases. Okay, so basically to give you an idea of how this works. So in other words, at this point it will not just be a science problem as such, it will be a socio-economic, socio-political, and kind of a wicked problem of protecting common goods. If New York City is a common good, not only for people who live there and work there and the businesses, but also for all the tourists, let's say, and for the whole country as a center of financial activities. So how people value putting money into protecting New York City and making it resilient against floods is going to be very complicated problem, and not just one of science of sea level rise or climate projections. Okay, so it's a good article. I've obviously rushed through it by being very brief, but I have covered the most salient points according to me. It's a subjective judgment, so you can go and read the paper, which is relatively short actually. I have some good references as well. Okay, so I'll come back and look at the next paper that Udit recommended to me on resilience. Okay, see ya.